Yo guys, what is up? Here we are with another reading video. We are on chapter 16. I can't believe it. We're getting so far. And I am really excited. Thanks for our other next subscriber. And that's all I gotta say. Sweet. Okay, so without further ado, let's get right into it. We are on chapter 16, The Only Thing to Fear, by Caroline Tung Richmond. Chapter 16. The next 24 hours passed horribly for Zara. She slept fitfully, waking every half hour from the same awful nightmare of her uncle getting beaten, and dragged across the square, just like Mr. Carey weeks ago. And when she awakened, things didn't get much better. Even with the windows locked, the air sweltered and almost suffocated every one of Zara's breaths. She wished she could send a breeze through the room with her powers, but she couldn't take that risk, right under the Nazis' noses. They could kill her anyway, of course, but why give them a reason to? The longer she stayed alive, the longer she had to find her uncle. The stale stench of soiled bandages and days-old urine perfumed the room, making Zara's stomach curdle. There was a toilet at the corner that she and Christy used, but their two unconscious cellmates had wet themselves overnight. Christy had been doing her best to clean them, but the woman never stirred, never groaned. Even one of them, the older woman with crushed ribs, had died that morning. The soldiers had taken her body already, most likely to be incinerated. Zara stared at the cracked ceilings, trying not to think about the poor woman, or the pounding in her nose. It had swollen like a melon overnight, and even the softest touch made her want to scream. Yet, despite her bruises, Zara knew she was probably better off than her uncle. From her barred window, she could see the entrance to the prison, 100 yards away, all gray and grim. At least she had water, thanks to Bastian. Her uncle and the rest of the male prisoners probably had nothing. For hours, Zara tried to figure out an escape plan, but each idea fell to pieces. There were only two routes out of the room: through the windows or out of the bolted metal door. She could muster a wind to chew through the glass window, but the air wouldn't blast through iron. As for her new lightning ability, it wouldn't be much help to her here. She could shoot a lightning bolt at the door, but that would only electrify the metal instead of opening it. With her nose pulsing, she sank onto her mattress. Her head bowed low. It was Sunday, she realized, the day of the planned attack on Fort Goring. But instead of helping the Alliance prepare for the mission, Zara was locked in this room and had no way getting out, and the Alliance wasn't coming to save her. Not after Camp Hammerstein. All spark of hope emptied out of Zara, leaving her only a shell of a person. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Zara heard footsteps thudding down the hallway. Her pulse cartwheeled as the door swung open and a soldier marched inside, a box and a bucket in hand. He dropped both on the floor before turning on his heels. From the Nazis' Women's Charity League, he sniffed. "Shh! You women stink!" After he locked the door behind him, both Zara and Christy raced to the goods. Christy arrived first and slurped water straight from the bucket while Zara reached for the box. She was surprised to find a bundle of food inside it: a loaf of bread, a rind of cheese, and a few green apples. Her mouth watered at the sight of it all. She hadn't eaten since her arrest. Right before she tore off a chunk of bread, Zara remembered what the soldier had said to them, from the Nazis' Women's Charity League. Could Bastian be behind this somehow? He could have sent a letter to the League, maybe forging his mother or his father's signature. If he had gone to that much trouble, he might have hidden a message for her. With frantic hands, she scoured the box, running her hands up and down its sides, searching for clues. Frustration bubbled through her when she came up empty. "What are you looking for?" Christy said. She snatched the bread from Zara's hands and broke it in half. "They gave us food. Good food. Eat up." Zara blinked at the box. She had no idea what Bastian was trying to tell her, if he was telling her anything at all. Christy swore and spat out something. "A piece of paper. Pass the water, will you?" Eyes wide, Zara snatched up the paper and stared at it, the gears churning in her head. Her heart thudded as she unfolded it and read the message. Shift change. 2200 hours. Meet at Officers Hall, 2230 minutes. Christy stopped chewing. What does that say? Zara didn't answer. She clutched the paper tight in her hand, silently thanking Bastian, and returned to dismantling the box again. If Bastian wanted to meet that night, he must have given her something to get out of this room. Her hand swam through the box, coming up empty. Then she reached for the other half of the bread. Hands trembling, she broke it again, and something sprang out from the loaf. Something small, something metal. A 3-inch iron key. Both Zara and Christy stared at it. This was Bastian's escape plan. Zara's fingers closed around the key, and her gaze flew to the locked door. Hope bloomed inside of her, pushing aside the misery of the past few days, and she owed it all to Bastian. It couldn't have been easy finding out what room she was in and securing this key, but he had done it anyway. Is that a key to the door? Christy whispered. Zara barely heard the question. She stared out the window instead, trying to gauge the time. The sun had dipped below the horizon, but streaks of blue and purple stretched across the sky. It would be at least another 2 hours before 10 o'clock struck. She cursed softly. Christy made a grab at Zara's hand. What are we waiting for? She said, careful not to let the guards hear them. The soldiers don't change shifts until 10. Let me see that paper. Christy seized it from Zara's hands. Who sent this? Was it that Nazi, Bastian? He's not a Nazi, Zara scowled. How could Christy even say that after what he had done for them? Only a week ago, Zara had thought the worst about Bastian, too. But he had proved her wrong over and over again. He's the colonel's son. How can you trust him? You could think whatever you want about Bastian, but I'm leaving at 10, Zara said coolly. She didn't need an interrogation from Christy, of all people. Let me see the key. She lunged for it, but Zara sidestepped her. I only want to see it, you commie, Zara spat out before Christy could say a word. Memories slashed through her of how Christy had treated her. The name-calling and the smirks of making Zara's life more miserable than it already was. A breeze stirred at her fingers, but she curled it into a fist. For a second, Christy winced. Look, I know I've called you some things. Bootsteps thundered down the hallway towards the room, cutting Christy off. Icicles shot down Zara's spine, and she forgot Christy as the door flew open. Sentinel Atkins stood in the doorframe, his gaze fixed on both of them. Fear shot through Zara. She remembered how his hands had wandered over her the last time she had seen him. Had he come to finish what he had started? Quiet, the both of you, Sentinel Atkins barked. He stepped inside and locked the door behind him. Thinking quickly, Zara crossed her arms behind her back, tucking the key away from his prying eyes. We're sorry, her, Christy said, her head bowed. What were you shouting about? He stepped towards Zara, those watchful eyes of his searching every inch of her. The slightest of smiles played upon his mouth. Zara trembled, squeezing the key behind her, willing her face to remain calm. If he discovered what she was holding, he could fire a round through her forehead, no questions asked. Nothing of importance, her, she said. Our apologies. It won't happen again. Maybe you two need a lesson in sharing. His lips arched and pushed Zara hard, crying out. She stumbled backwards, losing her balance and her grasp on the key. The metal ping echoed through the room as the key hit the floor. The sentinel froze when he saw it. How did you get that? He demanded. Spittle sprayed from his mouth, and he seized Zara by the wrist, shoving her back against the wall. I found it, Zara stammered. Don't lie to me. He slapped her so hard that she saw stars. Who gave this to you? Did you bribe one of the guards? What did you offer them, huh? Zara struggled to shove his hands off of her, but he only tightened his hold on her wrists. He slammed her again, and this time her head snapped back, hitting the concrete wall, dizzying her. The sentinel curled one hand around her throat while he turned his attention to Christy. Who gave you the key? Tell me! Using his free hand, he snatched Zara's shirt, ripping the sleeve, but Christy jumped in and clawed at his eyes. Atkins snarled and knocked an elbow into her stomach, sending Christy to the floor, coughing. With him preoccupied, Zara smashed her hands against his chest to escape, but he yanked her by the collar so hard that she choked. He threw her on the floor next to Christy, pinning her there. Where do you think you're going, little Michelin? His face was only inches from her, so close that she could smell the coffee in his breath. His hands groped at her sweaty shirt. What else are you hiding? Panic raced through every inch of Zara's body. She thrashed and kicked, but the sentinel was too heavy, his arms too strong. She had to stop him. She knew what he would do to her next. As her fear spiked, she felt a marble-sized bolt of lightning spring into her hands. Next to her, Christy gasped. What should, where should we search first? Said Akin, who hadn't seen the spark on Zara's palm. As he started to rip Zara's shirt, she released a tiny bolt, shooting it straight into his belly. It wasn't enough to knock him unconscious, but his eyes shot open, stunned. He scuttled backwards, breathing heavily, his eyes clouded with confusion. Before he could lunge at her, Zara was ready. Charge, he thought. Another spark jumped into her hand, and she urged it to grow. She'd rather risk revealing her powers than to find out what the Sentinel had planned for her. Both Akin and Christy went still, their gazes locked on the fiery lightning crackling on her fingertips. Christy pointed at Zara's hands, speechless, while Sentinel Akin blinked at the ball of electricity. You're in, he said, fumbling for the radio on his belt buckle. The lightning burned hotter, doubling in size, and contorting out of Zara's control. Christy, get down, she managed to scream before she sent at the Sentinel. I need backup on floor 3. With his free hand, he tried to wrest his pistol from his holster, but his hands were trembling too much. I am requesting... Sentinel Akin didn't finish his sentence. Zara's bolt struck him straight in the neck and sent him careening into the air. His arms flailing, he soared backward and his head hit the corner of a cot frame, sending an awful crack across the room. He slumped onto the ground, legs twitching. Then he stopped moving altogether. Zara's eyes traveled over the Sentinel's body, but they stopped when she saw his face. His eyes were blank, his mouth slack. Christy crept toward him and shoved her fingers against his neck. Is he? Zara whispered. Christy glanced up. He's dead. Zara sank back against the wall, one thought rolling through her. I killed him. I killed the Sentinel. A wave of horror swept through her. Her heart shuddered at the sight of his body. He lay only a few feet away from her, but she could still feel his hot breath against her neck and his rough hands against her body. You can't ever hurt me again, she told herself. She dry heaved anyway. Christy shrank back from Zara, staring at her palms. Your hands. I had to stop him somehow, Zara blurted out. She knew there was no way to hide from what she had done, or who she was. Everything had happened so fast. The Sentinel attacking her, the lightning surging. Now Sentinel Akin was dead, and Christy knew about one of her powers. Zara felt dizzy just thinking about it. Christy couldn't quite get out the words. You're an anomaly. It's not something I can exactly advertise, a commie like me, Zara replied, a bitter note in her voice. Then a ripple of fear rolled through her. She didn't know how Christy would use this information about her power, but she couldn't worry about that right now. She had to find her uncle, and they had to break out of the fort as soon as possible. They had to run before Sentinel Akin's comrades came to check on him. Finally, Christy tore her gaze from Zara, her eyes drifting towards the Sentinel. You saved us. He didn't give me much of a choice, said Zara, not looking at the Sentinel's limp body. Seeing his eyes, both still open, made her stomach twist into a knot. But she pushed that image far away from her. She only wished she could erase that awful cracking sound from her mind when his skull met the cot's railing. Blinking slowly, Zara placed her hand on Zara's shoulder. Thank you. Zara startled at the softness of Christy's words, but it was a little too late for kindness. She shrugged off Christy's hand. We really need to go. What do you want me to do? Christy said. A tremor had entered her voice, as if Zara might shoot her with a lightning bolt at any minute. Find the key and get the door open. While Christy retrieved the key ring from Sentinel Akin's belt, she hurried to the door. Zara pocketed the other key that had been knocked across the room. Then she wrestled the Sentinel's pistol from his holster, her stomach heaving the entire time as she tried not to touch him. She didn't have much experience with pistols. She'd only had one brief lesson where her mother had taught her how to load a shotgun for hunting deer. Pistols were Uncle Red's realm of expertise, but she would have to do her best. She didn't want to reveal her abilities to anyone else unless absolutely necessary. Christy unlocked the door, and Zara checked the gun's ammunition. She wished she had a few minutes to sit on a cot and catch her breath, but they had to move. It was too early to meet Bastian, but she couldn't stay in this room with the Sentinel's body, especially after he radioed the other soldiers. You know how to get out of the hospital? Said Christy, her eyes trailing over Zara's hands. I'll figure it out. It's not like I have a map. Zara peered beyond the door to find an empty hallway. For now, she had to find her way to the prison to free Uncle Red. After that, they'd have to escape somewhere. They couldn't go home, not after Zara had killed a sentinel. The thought of leaving their farmhouse made her heart rip in half. But the important thing now was finding her uncle, and getting both of them out of the fort alive. Zara slipped into the corridor, following Christy and her uncle. Oh, wait, what? No, not following Christy and her uncle. Zara slipped into the corridor, followed by Christy, and a foul, rotten stench flooded her nose. The hallway was in a state of decay. Water stains covered the ceilings. The ceiling tiles were crumbling or missing altogether. 24 doors, like the ones they had escaped from, spread to Zara's left, right, and left. Glass skylights hung over her head, revealing a black sky. A siren blared to Zara's eardrums. Both she and Christy froze. The soldiers were coming. As the alarm pulsed through her head, Zara searched for the stairwell, her ankle still unsteady and throbbing. But fortunately, she could walk on it. Christy didn't follow her this time. Instead, using the sentinel's keys, she ran from door to door, releasing people inside. "Mom!" Christy cried every time she unlocked another door. "Are you in here?" The hall soon swelled with women and the elderly, their hair wild and their eyes like sunken craters on their wan faces. Christy pushed them through, but couldn't find her mother. The Nazis must have taken her to an isolation cell somewhere else. In one great mass, the crowd swarmed to the end of the corridor where Zara had finally spotted a faded exit sign. Zara dashed down the stairwell with the rest of the horde, storming down 2 flights of stairs until they reached the main level of the hospital. 3 women at the front burst through the door, only to throw themselves onto the chipped tile floor. Screams echoed in the stairwell as gunfire sprayed from the soldiers stationed on the main level. "Get down!" Zara shouted, but the warning came too late. 2 people collapsed in front of her, their bodies erupting with blood. One of them, an old man with frost-white hair, toppled near Zara with a bullet-wide hole in his gaping in his wrinkled neck. Zara crawled towards the door and fired off her pistol until the magazine emptied. One of her rounds drilled into a soldier's shoulder, but the rest of them went wide. The guards pushed forwards, their rifles pointed at the Kleinbahn, ordering them to surrender. Zara was out of bullets. They had no other weapons. With a sinking feeling, she realized there was only one way out of this. She had to use her powers, even if it meant revealing herself as an anomaly to the Nazis. Fear rushed up her throat, but she tamped it down. If she didn't fight them now, they would kill her and everyone else in this hallway. While the soldiers snaked closer, she urged her hands to charge. Sweat dribbled down her forehead. But the lightning finally came, only a spinning ball of energy at first. She commanded it to grow, larger and deadlier. As soon as it swelled nearly beyond her control, she unleashed it at the guards, sending it crackling into her chests. She caught the horror on their faces before as all 5 of them fell onto their back, their limbs twitching. A stark silence fell inside the hallway stairwell. Zara looked behind her to find dozens of people blinking at her, all of their mouths dropped open. "Commie, traitor." She waited for the names to come, but they didn't. They only stared. From the back of the group, Christy stood and broke the quiet. "What are you staring at her for? Haven't you ever seen an anomaly?" Before anyone could respond, Zara finally found her voice. "We have to leave right now. More soldiers are probably coming. Grab any weapons you could find and run as fast as you can." She knew most of them had never held a gun, but there was strength in numbers, and that was all they could count on right now. Hesitantly, the Kleinbahn moved. A trial middle-aged woman searched the floor for ammunition while Christy snatched a rifle from the floor. "Come on, this way," Zara said. Urging her legs forward, she dashed out of the hospital entrance and into the cool spring night. Giant floodlights lit the fort, blanketing them in a swath of fluorescent light. Zara blinked against the harsh brightness before she spotted the military jail 200 yards to the right. The fort's sirens blared louder. On our left," Christy said, her voice nearly lost in the noise. Zara's gaze jerked to find 30 soldiers rushing towards them. Shots fired. Some of the Kleinbahn dropped flat to the ground, while others scattered towards the fence to escape. Christy ducked behind a concrete bench, firing shots from her newly stolen rifle. The gunfire blasted through Zara's senses, but there wasn't time to shrink back in fear. She summoned her lightning again. It started as it always did, only a small flare, but soon it crackled over her palms, doubling in size every second. She reined it in, even though it yearned for release, but she urged it to grow even bigger before she aimed it at the Nazis. The spidery bolt sprinted hungrily towards the soldiers, strangling their bodies with its electric fingers. Another bolt flew towards the neatly trimmed trees and climbed up its branches. Soon all the leaves roared in billowing flames. They're falling back, Christy said. She gave Zara a triumphant smile, but their victory was short-lived. Another stream of soldiers joined the fight. 5 tanks rolled in behind them, their machine guns pointed straight at Zara. And at the sight of them, dread shot through Zara. The remaining sparks of lightning died in her hands. The entire weight of Fort Goring was crushing down on her, and she didn't know how much longer she could fight back. Not against the fort's endless supply of soldiers and weapons, but she gritted her teeth and forced herself to think about her mother, the bravest woman she had ever known. And Zara had to make her proud this night. "Run!" Zara screamed to the others. "You have to get out!" While Christy and the other women stumbled to their feet, Zara gathered every last bit of strength she possessed and lifted her hand to conjure an enormous tornado. The biggest one she'd ever created. She would fight to her very last breath if she had to, but before she could muster a breeze, she heard the rumbling of engines clanging into her eardrum. For a second, Zara thought the Nazis had sent in more reinforcements, but then she saw a barrage of transport trucks crash into the barbed wire that surrounded Fort Goring. More trucks followed suit until the fence crumpled underneath their huge tires, grinding the wire to shreds. The vehicle doors sprang open, and dozens of people spilled out of them. Most were armed with rifles, but a few carried machine guns. They couldn't be Nazis. They were dressed in all black instead of all green uniforms. Zara had no idea where or why they had come until she heard their deafening war cry, "Freedom or death!" And that is the end of chapter 16. Thank you guys for listening. Sorry about the end. I had some annoyances while I was recording, so if there were little pauses, it was me trying to get rid of the annoyances. But thanks for watching. If you like the video, make sure to give me a thumbs up, like, subscribe, and comment down below. And I'll see you guys in the next video.